You that have just joined, welcome to this opening panel as part of Communicate Online 2026. This session is all around convincing your colleagues, all around our title is convincing your colleagues the role of internal communications. And you can see, and that was what just slightly threw me, a poll has just popped up. So as we're getting started, we would love you to share your thoughts on what is the biggest barrier to good internal communications in your organization. So you can see that poll has popped up there. So please do take time just to quickly give us your responses, and we'll come back to that later in the session. Just as I was saying, please do use the chat function. The chat function is there for you, like you would at another an in-live conference, be able to chat to other delegates. But just to say that we as panelists will not be checking the chat. If you've got any questions for us, please do use that Q&A box. You should be able to see it at the bottom of your screen, just a few boxes along from the chat function. And if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, perhaps use your name, your organisation, and perhaps where you're joining us from this morning. That would be lovely. Just to introduce myself, my name's Helen Meech. I'm director of the Climate Coalition, and I'm really excited to be here to be chairing this conversation this morning, because this session sits at the heart of a challenge that so many of us face: is how do we use internal comms to unlock storytelling, confidence and advocacy from colleagues at every level. And internal comms matters whether you're in a large institution with multiple sites or you're a small team spread across the country. We all need to engage our colleagues who are busy, we're overloaded, we're sometimes unsure where to start, or sometimes people can be hesitant to speak up. And for many of us, the challenge isn't only internal. We work in networks, partnerships. I run a big coalition, and our ability to communicate well inside those organisations and networks directly shapes how we show up externally. And so strong internal comms really helps colleagues understand why that collaboration matters, what we're achieving together, and how their role connects to that bigger movement. So that culture that we're building internally doesn't just stay internal, it determines how we operate outside and externally too. So I'm really, really excited about the brilliant panel we've got here this morning, who are each going to bring a really different perspective on how we can use internal communications to shift culture, build shared purpose, and surface the stories that help our organisations lead by example. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with you, Emma. And then
Morning, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us to join, inviting me to join the panel. Feel very privileged. So my name's Emma Bridger. I run a couple of companies. I'm founder of a company called People Lab. We're experts in employee experience, engagement, and of course, internal communication. And another company called the EX Space, which is a membership-based learning community. We have a free membership, so if you're interested, sign up to EX Essentials. It's all free, no obligation, EX Space, and you can find on there lots of resources around EX and internal comms. And just one final plug, written a few books on the subject. My latest book, People First Internal Communication, is out next week, which is quite scary. And I found out last night it's number 4 in the Amazon PR chart. So I'm hoping for a Christmas number 1. So if you're interested, I can give you a discount code, but yeah, delighted to be here. Thank you.
Oh, love the idea of Christmas number 1, Emma. Thank you. And please do use the chat to share those links. I think that would be really helpful. Rob, can we come to you?
Hi, I'm Rob Leaney. I'm the Senior Internal Communications Manager at WWT, the Wetlands Charity. And my history has been several environmental and animal welfare charities working in internal communications. So I'm very honoured to be with this particular panel. There's a good mix here, and I'm really looking forward to it. And welcome everyone. I'm distractedly watching the chat. I'm going to turn it off in a minute, but it's great to see everybody saying good morning and saying where they're from. It's brilliant.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. And over to you, Kate.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here today. My name's Kate Waters. I'm Internal Communications Lead at the University of Cambridge. I'm also a Fellow of the Institute of Internal Communication, and last year I did an MA in Internal Comms where I focused on how communication can drive behavioural change in organisations. But before working at the university, I worked in the NHS and in the charity sector, so I do have a lot of understanding of what it's like to try and deliver excellent communications against the odds. So looking forward to talking to you more about this subject today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate, and thanks everyone. So this session, we really want to keep it practical. We want to focus on what works, what doesn't, and what we can all take back to our teams this afternoon and back into our organisations for the long term. And to help guide us as a panel, we've had a poll running. So perhaps if we could just flash up the results of the poll, and we're going to try and respond to what you as our audience need as much as possible. So here we go. What are our barriers to internal communications? So we've got a bit of a tiebreaker almost. So a mixture of folk being too busy or too siloed, but also kind of the need, the feeling of not enough clarity from leadership sort of coming through as sort of a bit of a second there. So panelists, perhaps if you can cover those three areas in particular around being too busy, too siloed, and need for clarity from leadership in your answers this morning, that would be fantastic. But let's dive in. Our panelists are kind of give us a short overview each, and then we're going to come for some Q&As. For those of you who have just joined, please do use the chat to introduce yourselves. But if you do have any questions for the panelists as you're listening to their presentations, then please do use that Q&A function. Kate, let's come to you to start. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. So yes, I really do believe that investing in internal communications and employee engagement is worth it. I know there are lots of challenges, but I think that it really is the secret ingredient that can help your organizations amplify their impact and achieve your mission against the odds. If your employees are engaged and motivated, if they feel pride in the organization and feel recognized for the work they do, they're going to be more motivated at work, but they're also going to be advocates for your organization in the outside world. And there are some key things that you as communicators can focus on. And I think, given how busy you all are, getting really focused on the things that are going to make a difference is really worthwhile. So to encourage your employees to be advocates, it's really important that you're helping your leaders be visible advocates for your organization, that you're helping them to communicate openly and transparency to build that trust with employees, that you're facilitating employee listening and giving your employees opportunities to get involved in helping your organisation succeed. And also finally, that you're showing how employees are being recognised and rewarded for being advocates. So they're the four things that I think are really worth focusing on. And I know that some of the other panelists have got ideas about how we can practically go about doing that. So I'll hand over to Rob next.
Thanks, Kate. There's a lot of what you said I'd already kind of written in my notes, so I think that's I agree with all that. Absolutely, our people are our warmest advocates, so why wouldn't we rally them to our cause? And our people want to feel connected with our causes as well. So as Kate said, there's real value to engaging people with that, because it kind of almost it levels the organization. It brings a holistic approach, and people feel it's not just the people who are delivering action and environmental action. It's people in IT, people in people teams. It's those people can all feel better connected through activating a bit of activism, I think. The second point that I wanted to bring up actually was where internal comms sits within the organization. This is a bit of an age-old debate. Does internal comms sit in a HR team? Does it sit in a communications function? And I think in this context, internal comms sits well within a broader communications pool of specialism, because then internal comms is acting strategically rather than I can't find a better way to put it, so apologies if there are any kind of HR specialists on the call, but actually rather than being a service to HR, I think it's really important that internal communications is seen part of that strategic function in its own right. And internal comms within that team, within having those connections into external comms, internal comms is your route into the levers of engagement and connection that HR pull as well. So it's internal comms gives you access to all their connections throughout the organization, which it helps overcome some of those digital and geographical barriers that we've been grappling with for some time, with hybrid working and people working in different locations throughout the UK and even beyond in different countries. It's probably enough.
Thanks, Rob. Over to you, Emma.
Cool. So, excuse me. So I fell into internal comms completely by accident in the 90s. I started my career as an academic in the area of behaviour change. I'm fascinated in Kate's research. I'm going to check that out. And I'll be honest, I didn't have a clue what it was all about, really. I kind of lectured in the theory of communication. I worked in health psychology. And I got this job, this internal comms job in like the mid 90s, hadn't got a clue, absolutely loved it and saw firsthand how great internal comms can add real value to the organization. So I worked in-house for 10 years doing comms engagement and then set up my business. And I kind of fell out of love with internal comms in the mid 2010s because I got a bit fed up with seeing the same issues coming to the fore. Things like, how do we get line managers to do a great job of this? How do we get a seat at the table, which has kind of came up in the, in some of the stuff in the poll, and I felt like I've never really worked with a bunch of people who are more creative and just energized and innovative as internal comms folks. So I was thinking, why are we not solving these problems? Anyway, fast forward to a few years ago, and AI comes along, and AI is kind of, a once in a generation kind of event, I think, in terms of how it will absolutely transform the way we all work. And the wonderful thing about AI, I'm personally quite optimistic about it because I feel that a lot of the stuff that Kate talked about, storytelling, advocacy, the real human side of internal comms, we all knew were the right things to do, but we didn't have time to do it because we were so focused on writing copy for intranets or writing scripts for CEO, events or films or, the kind of operational day-to-day, letting people know about stuff. And the wonderful thing about AI is AI can now take up a lot of the slack in terms of the expertise of comms. So AI can write an amazing comms plan. It can write fantastic copy. It can write that script for your chief exec. It can personalize. We've dreamt about personalization in comms for years. Just not had time to do it. AI can write in different tones of voice for different types of people. What that does, what I'm excited about, is that frees us up to the genuinely human work of communication. So we can search out those stories. We can really focus on how to support our people to be advocates. We can lean into the creativity, the curiosity, the human side of communication. So I'm hugely excited about where we go next. And I think that there's this kind of burning platform moment with AI coming along, but I think it will absolutely be a force for good. Of course, we still need to have our expertise. We need to be able to look at what AI does and say, yeah, that comms plan is right, or have you lost the plot, AI? You're hallucinating today, as we all know it can do. But it frees us up to do the real work of communication, the work we should have always been doing, but we just got bogged down in the operational detail. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and what I'm hugely excited about.
Brilliant. Thanks all. Really fantastic openers there. So let's talk about busyness. Like that's one of the things that came up really loud and clear in that poll. And you started to touch a bit on that already, Emma. Like what would you say to that sort of thing of people just feeling too busy to prioritize internal comms?
So shall I kick off then?
For Emma.
So it's a big question. The thing is, in internal comms, you're a victim of your own success, right? So the better you are at it, the more people want a piece of you and a piece of your team, and the more requests that come into your inbox. And I think internal communicators are often fixers and doers. We want to do the right thing. We're often people pleasers. There's a kind of a type of person often that kind of works internal comms, and many of us kind of want to say yes. And, we could have 24 hours a day and work non-stop, we still wouldn't get everything done. So for me, how do we prioritize? So we use a lot of tools in the work that I do that are borrowed from other disciplines. So marketing, customer experience, IT, tech even. So we use a lot of like design thinking tools, service design methods, positive psychology. So moving away from kind of the traditional tools of comms, which we know AI can do really well, to using things like design thinking. I'm saying, what on earth has that got to do with comms? What it does is it kind of forces you to sit on your hands and not jump to solution and spend some time genuinely understanding what the problem is you're trying to solve. And there's some really simple, practical tools in there. So let me explain. Let's think about comms as an experience rather than as a piece of copy or the intranet. And if we're trying to improve the experience of communication, we might map a journey, or we might map an experience. And in doing that, we get people in a room, either online in a room or in person in a room, and we get them to tell us, what is that comms experience like, whatever it is we're looking at. And in doing that, we hear firsthand what's working, what's not working. And we also hear about what good could look like. And we use tools like moments that matter to prioritize. So voting dots really simply on a journey map to say, well, you've told us what's good, what's mediocre, and what's not great in this comms experience. Now take 3 dots and say what really matters to you. Very quickly, you get a really great sense of where to focus. And what you can then do with that insight, you can play it back to your stakeholders and say, we've done some work with our people. We know what's going to make the difference for them. And it gives you the insight to be able to push back on all those operational requests, because everybody thinks they know comms. Everyone's an expert, right? Everybody tells you this is what I think you should be doing. So for me, starting off with those kind of tools like mapping a comms experience or a journey, prioritizing moments that matter is a really great way to push back on those requests that come through.
Kate, let's come to you.
Yeah, that's really valuable advice from Emma there. I definitely think that speaking to your own employees about what they value when it comes to internal comms, what's going to make the difference for them, why do they advocate for the organisation now, what puts them off advocating, but also you can look at some research that's been done in other organisations. So, for example, there's a piece of a report called the IOIC Index from the Institute of Internal Comms, which asks employees across the country what do they really value when it comes to internal comms. So you can use some statistics from there. I saw some really interesting research at a conference recently, I think it was from Barclays, where they were saying that where employees who voted internal communications as excellent, there were 3 factors that really made the difference, and that was people hearing from their top leader or CEO on a regular basis every 2 to 4 weeks about the organisation's strategy, having opportunities to feel listened to and involved, and understanding how their work contributes to the success of the organisation. So you could get quite ruthless and think, okay, well, this is what research is telling us, this is what our employees are telling us, these are the 3 things we're going to do when it comes to internal comms. So, for example, at the university, I do a listening session with about 200 employees, but it's once a term, so it doesn't actually take too much time to organise, but it's really important that people know there is that time every term where staff are going to be able to hear from the top leaders and have a say on the issues that are affecting the organisation. So yeah, get really ruthless about what you're going to spend time on and what you're going to cut out.
Thanks, Kate. Rob, what's your take on the busyness question?
Yeah, I was just listening to I'll first of all, yeah, there are great resources from IOIC that are worth looking at. I use that a lot, particularly kind of being a very small team of one within a wider team of a pool of comms. I was just thinking about what Kate was saying about when people feedback on how good their their perception of how good their internal communications is as an organization. And there's always that question of whether people see internal communications as all the internal communication being done across the organization, and it's very easy for us with an internal communications title to say, oh, well, they mean us. And actually there's almost a role there for internal communicators to ensure that the standard of internal communication is 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 appropriate for the organization. Otherwise, you can be very much you can be speaking in isolation, because without a culture of people understanding how they share their stories, how they communicate with other teams and kind of build those connections, we can only facilitate that, but we can't lead it by just kind of pumping content into the internet, etc. So, yeah, I think what I'm saying is I think what Kate said is right. It's about being ruthless and kind of thinking about what's important and making sure that you're not just being kind of a feed of content into those internal channels and busying yourself with that, which feels like busy work, and really thinking about what's important and what you can influence beyond things that are seen as your remit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And while we've got you, sort of the other big barrier that came up in the poll there was around sort of siloed working, and I think kind of connected to that, kind of working across different places and spaces and organizations with sort of different departments and functions can be a challenge within this as well. So, obviously Wildfire and Wetlands Trust, you've got staff across different sites and properties with very different workplace sort of experiences. So how do you bring that together in your work?
Do you know, I nearly came on and then said, "Oh, of course we've fixed that." It's always a difficult one to fix, and I think you'll never fix it. Or it'll never feel perfect for us working in internal communications. But I think there is a lot that we can do, and actually, although it's very much an assumption that we live in a digital first age. That's the way that everything's gone, because digital's easy. You kind of we talk about having the intranet as our single point of truth, but particularly with a dispersed workforce, including people working away from screens, and people are working in fields and kind of behind service desks and things like that. It's about embracing the full channel mix and making sure that we don't just rely on digital. That's like our main source of our main communication channel, but posters still work. And one of the benefits of having an internal communication function kind of close to hand for external communicators is the network that we have as internal communicators. So within WWT, it's very important for me to know all the centre managers and kind of know who the Marcoms people on site, because to cut to the chase, if you're a member of staff or a volunteer and you get an email from the centre, from internal comms or a director even, you're still going to prioritize the email that's from your centre manager, the person that you know, and the person that could kind of that you trust to tell you like the really key important things over a centralized internal comms. So leverage those networks through your internal comms function would be my advice, and we do that because that's if you really want to cut through fast, you use the existing local networks.
Yeah, that trusted messenger, same as in external comms. Sometimes the messengers is important as the
Yeah.
message, right? Kate, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's funny because you would think that the University of Cambridge, being based in Cambridge, wouldn't have problems with silos, but actually we're based in over 100 different buildings, over 100 different departments. And so life, if you're working in the Department of Maths, is very, very different to if you're working in the School of Arts and Humanities in a different building across Cambridge. So actually a focus of my research was about how can communication help drive collaboration across the university. And I did interviews with staff and found that, there are some key things that really help to encourage collaboration in organisations wherever people are working. And they're things like being really clear about what the shared goals and the shared priorities that unite everyone are. And obviously you can use storytelling to bring that to life for people, using stories from people on the front line and from leaders. And trying to improve mutual understanding so that people in one part of the organisation understand what it's like to be in a different part of the organisation doing a different role. Things like informal networks, and we have communities of practice, which are sort of online and in-person networks for people who are doing similar roles or working in a similar field. And while it wouldn't be our job as communicator to set those up, we can obviously help to promote them and sort of show the impact that they're making in the organisation. So they can be really helpful. But that you can't be in-person meetings and personal connections for driving collaboration. So it is important that there are opportunities sometimes for people to come together and actually just build those relationships. So thinking about how we can be intentional about when we do arrange in-person events for staff, how do we make sure that we are mixing up people in different parts of the organisation and helping people to sort of do more cross-team working, work on projects with a shared goal, involving people in different parts of the organisation. So they're just a few ideas that I found work well.
Great, thanks, Kate. And so those points around kind of, whether it's a physically dispersed team or your hybrid or home working based team, those kind of moments of coming together are really important, aren't they? Emma, what do you think about this theme of kind of siloed working?
I mean, everything that Rob and Kate have said, absolutely, agree with, endorse, spot on. So what I'll do is, rather than kind of repeat what's been said already, I'll share another tool, be practical with this. So, I mean, it's something that, as Rob said, it's been around. Well, it's been around since I first started in the corporate world back in the 90s. And And it's like you look at it and think, well, what do we really mean by siloed working? And I think, again, it's dead easy for people to use it as a bit of an excuse. Oh, we all work in silos. Now, a tool that I use a lot in the work that I do is from positive psychology. It's called appreciative inquiry. Some of you might have used it before. Horrible name, but dead simple tool. So quite often, when we look at something that's not working, we say, right, surveys told us, or we've heard from our people, we work in silos, right? We go straight solution, let's fix it. And we put in place a load of initiatives to try to fix silo working. Just reel back from that a little bit. So appreciative inquiry, really simple 4-step process. First of all, it's called appreciative because it's a strength-based process, right? So it's a very psychologically safe tool to use with people because it doesn't get people being defensive about how things are, right? So you start off, you say the best of what is. So you say, tell me a story or tell me about a time when you weren't working in a silo, when you were working really well with other people across different teams or areas, locations or functions, when it was like, you were really collaborating well, it was seamless, it was frictionless. Think about a time when that happened in your working career. What was going on for you? How did it make it feel? What was possible, right? You gather that data. And again, AI now, when you run this sort of activity, can analyze that in seconds. It used to take me days to do that. Now it can do it in seconds. So that's where you start. So you learn about what does good look like, and that will give you so many amazing insights. Then you talk about future vision. Right, let's imagine if anything was possible. Let's fast forward 12 months. We fix this. What's happening? What's going on? What's different? How are people behaving? How are you feeling? And again, we get a future vision. That gives you so much insight straight away. And again, because of the appreciative, strength-based nature of it, it means that people aren't being all defensive about, well, it's not me, it's everybody else. I don't work in silos. Straight away, you're just getting so many good insights out, and it's a much more productive way of working. Step 3 is where you get a little bit more realistic. It's that gap analysis. So we know what good looks like from past experiences. We know where we want to be. Okay, how near or how far? But by the time you get to that question, because you've had these kind of 2 very strength-based conversations, people are much more ready to be really kind of pragmatic and ready to roll their sleeves up and think about the gaps and the solutions, right? So they're not all defensive. They're not sort of saying, well, it's not me, it's everybody else. They go, yeah, and just when I've done this before, people are just in a good place when they get to step 3. And step 4 is, okay, what are you going to do about it? So talk about things like circles of control and influence. It's very easy to get people involved in this kind of ideas generation session. Everyone goes, great, right, Emma, you take it all away and you fix it. So really simple model, circles of control and influence. So concentric circles. So in the middle, what I can control. Next circle, what I can influence. Third circle, what's outside. So much of what we kind of struggle with in organizations, people have some kind of opportunity to influence or control, right? So you get to this point, say, what are you going to do differently? And there'll be some stickies either online or in person in the middle. Like, I can do this. I can actually take responsibility for some of this. Some of it will be right, I can influence it. Some of it will be like, actually, the best one in the world, that's outside of what I can do. So that's a really useful tool for sort of getting under the skin of a big kind of complex abstract problem like we work in silos and making it very real, very practical and doing something about it.
Love that, Emma. I love a bit of appreciative inquiry. Someone described that to me as like, let's start from what's strong instead of what's wrong. And I always like try and really hold that.
Really powerful.
Rob,
Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah, I'm just inspired by what Emma and Kate has said, particularly around kind of Kate was talking about the value of kind of being in person, bringing together people in person, and some of the tools that Emma's just talked about. Because it's often, and thinking about the poll and actually as not having the time to do stuff, it is really, really worth going to these different locations and where people are working and understand their reality. And actually, what Emma's talked about is almost kind of giving us a reason to invest the time in going and doing that. Because as well as us having that better understanding from going to where people are living and not living, but kind of working and doing that stuff and getting a better understanding of them, it's great for networking for stories as well, because then you're front of mind for for the next long while of, oh, we met Rob and kind of it's we've been talking about this at our site or in our team, and you're front of mind. It just makes it easier to collect those stories as well. It's a bonus.
And actually, Rob, you sort of touched upon that other theme I wanted to explore a little bit just before we go into questions from the audience, was around kind of that the storytelling and story gathering, because it's a perennial issue, isn't it? Internal comms, like, your organization has got such rich stories to tell, but how do you get them, and how do you get sort of come through? One of the questions actually is like, how do you encourage people with busy workloads to sort of prioritize this work? So you've given an example there, Rob, around kind of being there in person, or getting to build those personal relationships. Emma, Kate, how do you do it?
So I think you've got to recognize people are busy. They're not going to be thinking all the time, how can I help out the comms team? So you've got to build those connections so they know who you are, but also try to think about what is their day-to-day life like? Where do they go? What do they see? Go and talk to them about I mean, I guess there's two approaches. There's the sort of incentives and reminders. So, making it really easy and obvious for them to send in a story or let you know about something that's happened. Have different sort of reminders around their work environment. But also, I think actually going to speak to your colleagues and understand, what would make them share stories that would be interesting for the wider organisation. Is there anything that holds them back? Because, it's only when you actually start talking to people that you start to understand, oh, it's actually, I thought they weren't sending it because they were too busy, but actually it's because they're nervous about how their colleagues are going to react. They're going to look like they're attention seeking or something like that. So, really go and talk to a few people, and you can get so much rich information just from a handful of interviews and conversations to really try and understand what's going on and what the solutions could be.
Thanks, Kate. Emma,
Yeah,
tips or tools from you?
that's a great point, Kate, about not making assumptions about why things aren't working. I mean, it's not about storytelling, but years ago, not only a couple of years ago, I worked with a dairy manufacturer, or anyway, doesn't matter what company it was, but they had a recognition scheme, and people weren't using it, and people weren't nominating people. And we went out to speak to people in factories, and they said, it's our worst nightmare, the idea of being employee of the month when I work frontline in a factory, my face being on the back of toilet doors on posters. Can't think of anything worse. And the comms team went, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So it's a really good point, Kate, not to make assumptions about why things aren't working. And it's just obvious stuff, right? It's been said already. It's like, go and meet people where they're at. I mean, the amount of times, I've just hung out in canteens. And you're right, it's easy to think about digital first. And I've worked with all sorts of different organizations, and some organizations I work with, the people there don't have they're not online at all. They don't even have mobiles, they don't have any laptop. They work, literally in very kind of frontline sort of roles, and you have to go and meet them where they are. I've spent time in vans with teams going down motorways to go fix potholes. I've spent time in canteens, which is a bit more fun. It's just having that, going back to the human side of this, digging into those people skills, those human skills that we know are critical for the way the world of work is going. AI can do a lot of the technical and expert skills of old. So we need to really dial up our people first skills. So our curiosity, our empathy, our creativity. And because now the busyness thing's still there, but because AI can do so much of what we used to kind of have to do day to day, I think for me, I hope it frees us up to go and do a lot more of that getting out and speaking to people and spending time where they're at. So just grasp those opportunities, really.
Thanks, Emma. Rob.
Well, I cheekily have a question for Emma. Do you find that kind of like when you were in the van with the people fixing potholes, they probably wouldn't have realised that there was a story about fixing potholes. So sometimes people need a bit of encouragement to kind of realise there's a story in the day-to-day thing that they do, uh,
Mm.
which is, I'll let you answer the question.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I've written 3 books, right? Hardest thing I've ever done. I'm not a natural writer. It was hard work than giving birth to my 3 kids, and I'm not even joking when I say that. And if someone says to me, "Tell me a story about," my mind goes blank, and there's some psychology in that as well. It's like, because storytelling's hard, right? But if you say to people, "Tell me about a time when you felt this or when you did that," oh yeah, I've got loads of experiences I can. So it's just how we phrase it. So for me,
Mm.
getting stories out of people, so sitting in the van with a bunch of, and they were all men in this occasion, men. I mean, going down the M1 to fix potholes. Um, talking to them about, so what do you love about this job? What are the good bits about this job? Or tell me about a time when, or and they're a bit suspicious at first, but it's how you ask the question for me. So storytelling, and you're nodding furiously, you get that. But I think that's a key point. Because the minute you say to someone, tell me a story, I'm like, my mind goes blank. I have
And
no
it's
idea.
Let's come to some questions from the audience. That ding ding dong was to let me know we've got 10 minutes to go. So I want to make sure we come to the questions that we've got from our audience here. So and I'm going to start with those with the most upvotes. So the first one, as someone who works in local government, often the big barrier is getting politicians as a leader on side, especially given the current climate. Any advice on how to get them on side for environmental projects? And I guess as part of that is like, how do you get your leadership to show up for your internal comms? Thoughts on that?
I can have a go.
Thanks.
I mean, I obviously don't know this specific context, but it can be really difficult. You know, sometimes you're lucky and you work with leaders who really get it, really value internal communication, and it makes your life a lot easier. But quite often you're working with leaders who aren't thinking about internal communication and aren't perhaps for various reasons they don't want to be visible, they want to be seen doing other things. So I think the only way I've learned to approach it is to really try and understand what matters to those leaders, what are their top priorities right now, and think about how you can help to solve those problems. Because if you can go to them with some suggestions about how internal comms can help them solve the things that matter to them right now, they're much more like, it's going to help you to build that relationship with them and help you to convince them of the things that you know are important. So, just as an example, I know that at the moment, a lot of leaders are focused on cost saving, and it can be frustrating sometimes because you know that doing a lot of internal communications about the need to save money is quite negative, and doesn't always inspire employees. But if you can talk to your leaders about, well, actually, if we really involve our employees in the challenges here, they've got some brilliant ideas. Let's talk to them, get their ideas, show how, they can really add value and help the organization overcome these challenges. Then you can start getting them more interested and then help, encourage them to talk about other topics as well.
Thanks, Kate. Other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. Find out what keeps them awake at night. Meet them where they are. Don't even talk about communication sometimes. I had this years ago when I was in house. I got a new job and met with all the senior team, all great. And then the last one was the customer services director. And he actually said to me, I don't want you or your comms team anywhere near my business. And I was like, okay. And I found out, I thought I'm being quite tenacious, and also I'm very open about the fact I'm ADHD as well. I'm like, right, I'm not gonna let this one beat me. Found out he was a real advocate of lean methodology, which I'd never heard about before. This is a very long time ago. I went and got a book on lean, read up on it, and could see how I could speak his language. And actually, we were so aligned when I read into lean. I won't go into it now, but we were so aligned in terms of what I was there to support him to do and what he wanted to do. So I mean, it was hard work. I'm not going to lie, but that's how I did that. So that's kind of one thing I would say. And I had another thought popped into my head, and it's gone. But yeah, I think find out what keeps them awake at night. Absolutely. That was it. To the cost saving piece, had a very similar when I first started the business, it was just after the crash. Started my business in 2009. So it was quite hard times. I worked with another company who were going through a really tough time, and they were looking at making people redundant, and they had a few options that make people redundant or cut pay or whatever it might be. And they involved their people, really brave thing to do. We got a bunch of kind of like advocates. We pulled together a bunch of advocates or champions together who helped to kind of solve the problem. And the team said, we don't want to make people redundant. We think we can get a yes vote through the unions to reduce pay. But actually, someone actually share the case study. They never had to reduce pay because they came up with so many amazing ideas in terms of how they could be more efficient, more effective, that they didn't have to. So to your point, Kate, they didn't have to do it in the end anyway. So it's a really
Yeah, that's brilliant.
yeah, pretty powerful example of when you involve people. So yeah.
Love that. A question probably to get you to start with, Kate, around how can internal comms be used to change behaviours in your organisation, given everyone has other priorities in their role? How do you make them feel that you're not adding to their plate that already feels pretty full?
Yeah, really interesting question. So what I found through my research was that there are sort of two sides to encouraging behaviour change through communication, and I like to think of it as clarity and context. So the clarity bit is about leaders being really clear about the kind of behaviours they want to see, trying to set an inspiring vision for how those behaviours will help the organisation succeed in the future, making sure leaders are role modelling those behaviours and recognising and rewarding behaviours. So it's really obvious for everyone in the organisation what are the desired behaviours, because if you don't have that clarity, you're just, people are just not going to be thinking about it. But the context is the bit that's really important, because people aren't open to change or willing to change their behaviours if there isn't that atmosphere of psychological safety in the organisation. If you can get to a place where you have a positive, supportive culture, people aren't afraid of change. And then the leader comes and says, "Oh, we'd really like to encourage more collaboration. We'd really like to encourage more innovation." People are open to it. And so to create that positive climate, you still need the inspiring vision. You need leaders who are empathetic, who show how they do care about employees and the experience they have at work. They're listening to employees. There are those open channels for open and honest communication and listening, and those opportunities to build personal relationships, whether it's through in-person events or networks across the organisation. So yeah, those are the two things that I think are really important: clarity and context.
Fab. Thanks, Kate. I'm going to take one last question from the floor, and then we'll need to sum up. This 45 minutes has absolutely flown by. So this question is from someone who has often feels inundated with their external communications duties, so that it's hard to prioritise the internal comms. How do you make time for internal comms in your comms strategy? Rob, go for it. Thank you.
I think this again goes back to kind of having if you've got your comms functions all working together. So I'd sit within a wider communications team. You're part of those conversations, and because we're a small organisation, and the way that we kind of work most efficiently is we have a pool of communications officers that we share across all those different disciplines. So they have their kind of favoured disciplines, and we leverage that. But actually, because internal comms is integrated with the wider communications functions. We know, for example, with campaigns, as part of if you're planning a campaign plan with external communications, then one of your audiences is the internal audience, and actually bringing on board internal communication to help you understand that audience and deliver the communications for that audience. For example, we had a really successful campaign recently to ban lead. And within that campaign plan, we had some specific, very rich content for our internal audience to activate them as activists on behalf of the organisation and for that campaign. And it involved explaining kind of how that campaign supports the charitable cause, how it supports the strategy, all that behind the scenes stuff, kind of like the people behind the doing the thing. And also we gave them templates for social media so that they get on social media and actually use that bolder voice that's actually within our strategy. So within our strategy and brand that we launched a couple of years ago, we were very clear that part of our new strategy and brand was having a bolder voice externally, and we're bringing people into that with things like our campaign planning and integrating internal audiences into that. But also, it's in our values and behaviours, and we're adding it to our onboarding documentation. So we're working with the HR and people teams to make sure it's kind of integrated across that broader internal engagement and connection piece.
I love that, Rob. We're out of time, but thank you all so much for such brilliant and inspiring contributions this morning. I've learned so much from being on this panel. I've been typing a few notes as we've been going along, and just wanted to reflect back a few themes that I've heard. Sorry we haven't got to all of the questions, but hopefully this gives you some answers. And I can see Emma's put a link in the chat of where to find some more tools. But some of the themes that stood out, the three factors of excellence that Kate started us with, hearing from leadership regularly, opportunities to be involved, and understanding how my work matters. We've heard a lot about the importance of psychological safety, building confidence, and really starting with what's strong, not what's wrong. We've heard a lot about how that human side really matters as much as the operational, really thinking about your messengers as much as your message and ensuring that people feel heard. We talked about the importance of prioritising, how you can use design thinking as a way to help with this, and really involving your wider organisation as part of this and thinking about your internal people as a core audience as much as your external people, and that the clarity and context are really key, the role of shared purpose in really bringing people together across organisational divides. So I hope you've enjoyed this morning. I hope you've left with some real practical tools and ideas that you can try straight away. And yeah, thanks for being here and enjoy the rest of Communicate.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.